She sells seashells by the seashore.
There is no seashore, so she can't sell shit about seashells. I screwed that whole thing up.
All right, hey guys, welcome back to another edition of 2M Football.
Oh, Mike started off this time, that's right.
First time for everything. Today, we continue with our second AFC East team, the Miami Dolphins.
Woo. Yay!
South Beach. The Dolphins, actually, that's not where their stadium is.
No, and it's snowing outside while we're recording this.
Chicago, and it's snowing, so I wish I was in South Beach. So the Dolphins were 10-6 this season. And it was their first winning season since
Mike forgot to start the timer.
Yeah, I'm going to be about 45 seconds behind. That's okay. So 10-6 was their first winning season since 2008.
And it was an exciting season. Like, it was actually fun to watch these guys play and see another team that's usually laughed at actually be competitive.
Come out of the basement of the AFC East and actually get a playoff berth. They snagged the number 6 seed in the playoffs, but then they got hammered in the wild card by Pittsburgh, 30-12. Although they were missing Ryan Tannehill for that game. It
was kind of sad. He was another one that went down with a broken leg, like Marcus Mariota. And I think that hurt the Dolphins.
Right. Obviously, it's going to hurt when you lose your starting quarterback.
And your leg.
And your leg. And his leg. But yeah, so after their Week 8 bye, the Dolphins won 7 out of their final 9 games to get to that 10-6 record.
Which is an exciting run.
Mm-hmm. Here's one thing I noticed, though, to kind of temper that a little bit. Only 1 out of their 10 wins all season came against a team that finished with a winning record.
So they were good against the...
They beat bad teams.
Yeah.
And their 1 win came against Pittsburgh during the regular season when Ben Roethlisberger didn't play most of that game. So I don't want to take away from their 10-6 season, but that's just something to note, is that they didn't when they faced more competitive teams, they didn't do well against them.
And I think that just comes with the experience, and especially because they have a new head coach who's going to bring about some changes, but, you know.
Yeah, and the big player who emerged this year was Jay Ajayi, the running back.
I don't think anybody expected him to be as big as he was.
No, but he really emerged as an offensive player that they can sort of build around. They can become a run-first team now. And
it opens up the playbook.
It does, which will help Tannehill. It'll help
just
everybody.
help the team.
It'll help the defense, get that time of possession up so that the defense gets to rest. Mm-hmm. It's a really good thing. A lot of questions, though, for a defense that gave up the 4th most yards in the league, which Matt will get to in probably like a half hour at this rate.
Yeah, right.
So we'll get started.
One last quick fact about the Miami Dolphins. Ooh. They were actually the 2nd most penalized team in the league.
Oh, boy.
Right behind the Oakland Raiders.
Ooh. That's not a good stat.
They had 131 accepted penalties for 1,206 yards of loss.
Wow. Let me just do some quick math here. That's an average of 75 penalty yards per game.
Yeah.
That's bad.
That's not good.
That's one of the stats you don't want to lead the league in.
But it was interesting when I was going over penalties. I was like, really? Because they didn't seem like it.
Right.
But we'll get to, when we start kicking off with the offense here, they had a huge problem.
They did have problems on offense, exemplified by their 22.7 points per game, which was 17th in the league, 333 total yards per game, which was 24th. 219 of those were pass yards, which was 26th in the league. But the rushing attack was a bit better with 114 per game.
And that's, I think, in most part due to Ajayi, which I don't think anybody anticipated him to be such a star.
No. So they lost Lamar Miller last offseason.
And then they acquired
Arian Foster
from the Texans, which I thought was a great move.
It seemed exciting at the time.
And then
he retired. No tears for him like you had for Steve Smith?
I got nothing.
Okay.
I give a moment of silence there.
Yeah, Foster played just 4 games before announcing his retirement in October. This is another one of those high-profile retirements this year. Guys who have been around, playing at a high level for a long time.
And you just never see it coming.
Yeah, and Foster did have an injury history and only actually lasted 9 seasons. But as we always say, running backs get beat up a lot. So shifting gears back to the quarterback, another injured player was Ryan Tannehill. He suffered a sprained ACL and MCL in a Week 14 win over Arizona, and he missed the rest of the season, including that playoff game.
And I think that hurt the Dolphins because Tannehill's a guy that's been around for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to think of him at first, but he kind of grows on you. Like he's becoming more comfortable with his offense. I think they've built up their receiver core rather well.
They have.
They have a key address, though. I'm sure it's on your board. I think I know it's on your board to talk about. The running game's a great thing. It opens up the play action pass. It allows you to get the ground game going, which takes pressure off the quarterback. And with the addition of Adam Gase as their head coach, who's an offensive-minded coach, as you noted.
Yep.
I think this is a great direction that this offense is going.
And Tannehill was having a good season. He completed 67% of his passes. He averaged 7.7 yards per pass attempt, which was highest that he's had in his whole career and top 10 in the league this season. He was on pace for fewer pass attempts this season, but still comparable touchdown numbers, which shows more efficiency. And he was also on pace for fewer sacks than either of the past 3 years, when he took 45, 46, and 58 sacks.
Yeah, he only took 29, so he almost cut those in half, which is a sign of offensive line strengthening. What really killed them, though, was in the penalty category, they had 22 offensive holding for 216 yards and 15 false starts for 75 yards. And that puts so much pressure on a quarterback because that's so much more yards you have to gain.
Huge difference between 1st and 10 and 1st and 15 or 20 for holding.
So, I mean, I think it's an overall young team, though. So, I mean, there's going to be growing pains, and Adam Gase seems like a guy who's ready to take the reins.
I think so. He's always, like you said, been known as an offensive guy. He spent time in Denver and Chicago as offensive coordinator. It was his first head coaching gig and just his first year as the head coach. So I would look for all this to improve next year, including Tannehill.
Oh, for sure. And I think he actually was in Chicago, too. And
I said that.
You said that?
Denver and Chicago. Thanks for paying attention, man.
You got it, buddy. But for those of us in Chicago is our actual hometown, and obviously we're going to follow the hometown Bears. May not be our favorite team, but we follow them.
We follow.
That was actually some of Jay Cutler's best years under Adam Gase. So to see what he could do to a quarterback who's as disliked as Cutler in Chicago.
Notoriously. Yeah, I think he'll have a great impact.
I think he's perfect to mold and help Tannehill out.
So with Tannehill out, the guy behind him as a backup is Matt Moore. He's a veteran backup QB. He's been in Miami, or he's been the backup in Miami since 2012 when Tannehill was first drafted. Like we mentioned, he got forced into starting duty after Tannehill went out, and he didn't play too badly, actually. In 4 games, he completed 63% of his passes, 720 yards, with an 8.3 average per attempt, and with 8 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions. And so I'd say he's definitely a really capable backup.
And he's an older quarterback, too, which kind of surprised you, because usually when you're an aging backup, that gets really worried, because one, you don't take the starting reps. You're aging as is, so you're kind of like a car that sits in the driveway. You know, they're sitting on the bench kind of rusting.
Right.
And all of a sudden,
all of a sudden they need you.
And that's like, I think every backup, no matter how old or how young you are, like, it gets exciting because you know that moment's going to come, but I don't care how much you know it's going to come. When it comes up, it's still a surprise. You never expect your number to get called.
I'd compare what he did to Josh McCown. You remember him. He's been a backup for a while, but known as one of the better ones. When he had to play for Chicago several years ago, he played really well. He went to Cleveland, had a good year there. And Moore stepped right in and played pretty well.
Yeah, and that's what you like is, these guys have been around that. I'm sure Gase, when head coaches and offensive coordinators change, they usually try to keep something of the original scheme. They add a ton of theirs that they would prefer to run. But these older quarterbacks have been through so many changes that it becomes second nature to them. And I think Matt Moore adapted well to Gase's style.
Yeah. And they're both going to have an easier time next year now that they can really lean on the running game, which leads us into Jay Ajayi. He took over the starting role in Week 5 and ran with it.
Literally.
Laugh track, where is it?
He
finished the season with 260 rushes for over 1,200 yards with 4.9 average per carry and 8 touchdowns, including 3 separate games where he ran for over 200 yards.
talk about a monster. And, like, I didn't even know who this guy was until he popped up on the stats charts I was looking at. I was like, who is this guy? And then you go back and watch the footage, and you're like, how did I not recognize this guy before?
I think once Foster got hurt, no one really knew between Ajayi, Kenyon Drake, Damian Williams. They've got all these young running backs that didn't have much playing time before.
They didn't know what to expect.
Right, but
they were
obviously,
for a shock.
Yeah, obviously they made the right choice giving Ajayi the starting role, and he is not giving it up. I watched some of his game tape, and because I didn't know much about him. Like you said, I hadn't really heard of him before this year, but he's got a lot of speed. In the games I saw, in the cases where the offensive line actually opened up a hole in the defense, Ajayi had the speed to really explode through the hole, and he can go sideline to sideline too. He'd explode through the hole and actually beat the safety to the boundary, to the sideline.
His east-west movement blew me away because he's in a full north-south sprint.
Right.
But yet he makes almost like a hard 90-degree cut but doesn't lose any of his speed.
Yeah, and that's really tough.
For a 2-minute offense, when you're running a 2-minute offense, that's crucial to get the distance in the middle of the field, but also being able to beat it to the sideline to stop the clock.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to the speed, he looks strong too. I saw he can run through arm tackles. He keeps his legs churning even when he gets held up at the line. And has good vision too to find cutback lanes. I saw him do that multiple times where he's going one direction, sees something open up on the other side, and just makes a quick jump cut and completely change directions and explode through the hole. He's fast.
He's went from a unknown rookie to a key component in the Dolphins machine. Mm-hmm. And I think he's only going to get better. At least I hope so.
Yeah.
If this is where he's starting, I can't wait to see next year.
I'm excited too. And then behind him, I mentioned Kenyon Drake and Damian Williams. They're both solid guys too. Drake was used as a kick returner also, and he averaged 30 yards per turn with a touchdown and had 5.4 yards per rushing attempt. So overall, I think this is a ground game that could be really dominant.
And the nice part is too, is as much as these rookie receivers have come up, Jesus, I know what we're talking about. These running backs have emerged, which is great because that opens up the play action pass to go to the key receivers, which they've struggled with in past years, but I think they've dialed in on something here.
I agree, and that's a good segue into...
I know it is.
Yeah, I know you know. So the first guy in the receiving corps to talk about is Landry Jones. I'd call him the Julian Edelman of this offense.
So you're okay with him?
I'm okay with him, yeah. He's not a touchdown guy, but he catches a lot of short passes and gets a lot of yards after catch.
He had the most receptions and yards on the team, 94 for 1136.
Yep, and 4 touchdowns, so he did get in there a few times.
Couple.
And then behind him is Devontae Parker, who was the first-round pick in 2015, who really expanded his role in year 2. He had 56 catches, 744 yards, and also 4 touchdowns. But the guy I really want to talk about, also my free agency pick for the Dolphins, I followed the rules this time, is Kenny Stills. Stills is 24 years old. He'll turn 25 before next year starts. And he's in his second year with Miami after spending the first 2 with the Saints. He was the touchdown leader with 9 this year for the Dolphins and was really a big play guy. He averaged 17 yards per catch on 42 catches for 726 on the year. And so I went and watched one of his games in Week 7 against the Buffalo Bills. And he's fast. That's always been the number one thing to know about Kenny Stills, is that he's really fast. He can take the top off any defense. So there's one play in particular where he was in the slot, lined up on the safety, who was, playing off 12 yards down the field where the safety plays. But even 12 yards down the field, Stills just blew right past him, took off right on the snap, went right past the safety. He just could not keep up. Unfortunately, this play ended up in an incompletion because Tannehill was late with the throw and underthrew it a bit. That's the thing with a receiver this fast. You gotta really throw it up there.
You feel like you're leading them too much when in reality you're probably leading them enough.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that just develops over time.
Yeah, and like I said, this was only his second year with Miami and only his first one really getting significant playing time. So they'll develop more chemistry and get that feel for exactly how far he needs to throw.
And that's exactly why I think Gase is a good fit, because Adam Gase is going to make sure that becomes a priority of making that his quarterback and receivers growing together.
Mm-hmm. just to underline the big play argument, he had 10 catches that went for 20 or more yards in each of the past 3 seasons. And he does it. Other thing I noticed is that he does a good job coming back to the football when he does get underthrown. This was a different play. He got underthrown on a deep pass, but he came back towards Tannehill, almost that he was running back towards the original line of scrimmage when he made the catch. And when he did that, he beat the defender to the ball, and like some kind of comic strip, the defensive back and the safety tripped each other while he caught the ball in front of them and then ran 60 yards to the end zone.
It's always terrible too, because everybody's looking at the football and you run into your own player. Like,
it's just embarrassing.
You feel stupid, but in a way, like, sometimes you can't help it. You're so focused on your job that it just happens. I mean, it's hilarious for us to watch, but I can imagine when they get up there, like,
just like, hey, get out of my way, man. I had that.
Like when the safety throws their hands up when they're looking for over the top help, and they're like, where were you? They kind of look at you like, what were you doing over here?
Yeah. So the only real negative that I saw in watching Stills play is that he doesn't always run the most precise routes. And this is where we're going to try something new. There should be a graphic on the screen illustrating what I'm about to describe. So there's one play.
Is it the highlighted one on the thing?
Good call. Yeah, it's the blue one. It's the blue arrow connected to the circle with the number 10 in it, because Kenny Stills is number 10. Okay, so
he's in your top 10?
No. So, as you should be seeing, on this play in particular, Stills ran a curl, kind of a slant curl. So he ran the 10 yards out, curled back. Tannehill wasn't throwing the ball quite yet, but instead of staying there, he started to kind of drift over towards the middle of the field. But when Tannehill did throw it to him eventually, he threw it to the spot he was expecting him to be at, which he wasn't there anymore. So he had to and that's what the red line is. The blue line is where he should have been. Then there's a red line where he just started to sort of drift off.
This was supposed to be simple and help our viewers. Now they're just staring at a bunch of scribbles. We understand it.
I can see it makes a lot of sense in my head. But the point is he deviated off the route, and it resulted in an incompletion because Tannehill threw it to where he thought he would be, which was actually behind where he was. So he had to try to dive back and make the catch, which he couldn't.
And it's one thing when you come back to help your quarterback, but it's another thing to hold, like the curl routes, short, quick slant routes. They're designed to be check down passes. That's why you're being put there, because they're going to give it to you and expect you to make up the difference.
You could argue that this one was on Tannehill a little bit too, because the idea behind a curl is the quarterback's going to throw it before you actually turn.
Once you hit the 5 yard mark where you would turn, that ball is starting to come out of the quarterback's hand. So as you turn, the ball is coming to you. That's why it always looks weird when these guys are throwing the football and the receiver's not looking. But that's, like you said, the design of these plays. It's designed to be so fast that the defense doesn't have time to really react.
Yeah, and just in general, his Stills routes didn't look that crisp. You know how you see guys like I brought up the Edelman thing. He makes a cut. It's very precise. He runs exactly.
If it's supposed to be at the 7 yard mark, exactly as he touches it, he makes the adjustment.
And it's not a rounded corner. It's a really sharp cut. The Stills look more like he was sort of like rounding edges off.
And as somebody who's studied coaching classes, is what they teach you when you look at an offense, is they're actually supposed to be crisp and snappy, because what it does is it helps stall the defender a little bit. If you're making a round sweeping turn, it's easy to follow that. You can sort of predict where they're coming out.
So that's an issue, but like I mentioned, Stills is young. He'll be 25 before next season. With the new head coach and Adam Gase, year 2, this is all stuff that can be worked on. But the natural talent is there, and that's what you can't teach.
Right.
So I have written here, get this man a new contract.
So you're saying re-sign him?
Re-sign for 4 years.
4 years?
4 years. He's young, and I think he can be a huge part of this offense.
Oh, yeah. I don't think he's going anywhere. Not when they've started to develop. You're not going to get rid of somebody. It would be one thing if he saw no passes, if he dropped a bunch of stuff, if he had tipped passes.
Here's the thing, though, is that the Dolphins' cap space is kind of low. They have about $40 million available this offseason.
So do like we do in Madden and sign them all to 7-year extensions. So you can re-sign everybody.
But I think since Stills still hadn't still hasn't produced at that elite level, I don't think they have to overpay necessarily.
No, they could give him what he's worth.
Mm-hmm. So moving quickly to tight end, there was some news here recently last week when the Dolphins traded for Julius Thomas from the Jaguars. He's an injury-prone tight end, but he's bigly productive in the red zone.
Go on.
Remember those years with Peyton Manning? He had 10-plus touchdowns.
This is true.
The issue has been the injuries. And I like the pickup because they didn't really have a tight end on the roster who was a big pass-catching threat for that. So I like the move. I think they should, however, re-sign one of either Jordan Cameron or Deion Sims, who are both free agents this year, because of the injury history with Thomas.
My personal pick would be Cameron.
Yeah.
Personally. I just liked his performance and the way he played overall. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's a risky pickup, but you're right. It's a position that needed to be addressed, even if this just holds them over until they can find something better.
Right. And Thomas was with Gase in Denver, so there's a connection there. And it's another weapon for Tannehill. Mm-hmm. Another step in the right direction for this offense, I'd say. Then really quickly, on the offensive line, they drafted Laramie Tunsil this year, and with their first-round pick. And he looked pretty good. Had an up-and-down rookie year, like a lot of rookies do, but looked good. They've got Mike Pouncey at center. He only played 5 games because of injury, but he's one of the best in the game. The brother of Marquise Pouncey on the Steelers. And they've got a free agent on the line at right guard in Jermon Bushrod, but he's bad, so don't re-sign him. Yeah, we need a buzzer sound. And that wraps up what I had prepared for the offense.
Well, the defense is a different story. And the numbers of really, I don't even know how to start this. So they allowed an average of 23.8 points per game, which was 18th. A total of 382.6 yards, which was 29th. Thank God it wasn't lower because you can't go much lower. 242.2 of those were passing yards, 15th. And 140.4 rush yards were 30th.
140? Wow.
And penalties were a huge problem, too. These don't sound like a lot because they only had 9 DPI and 9 unnecessary roughness, which isn't a whole lot. Mm-hmm. The teams averaged about 8.7 defensive pass interference, but they went for 126 and 135 yards respectively, which is a combined for total gain for the opponent offense of 261 yards. Mm-hmm.
That's not going to do it.
It's something that needs to be highly addressed. Mm-hmm. The team I really watched was against the Jets, which, as we know and we'll get to as we continue, was a very struggling team this year. Uh-huh. And you would think that, okay, this would be a good gauge to see how they do against a poor offense. They had 7 penalties in that game. 3 of those were defensive pass interference.
Ooh.
And then one of them was a horse collar. And I want to touch on this real quick because the horsecollar tackle rule changed. I don't know if you knew this.
Is there a 5-yard version of it now? Is that what the deal is?
No, it's about how it's called. So before, a horsecollar tackle would mean you'd have to actually grab up around the collar of the shirt and the pad and pull the player down. Now they changed it to you can touch anything above the nameplate. So if you grab the nameplate or anywhere above it and pull them down, it's considered a horsecollar tackle now.
Okay.
So they expanded the area where it can occur in a little bit more. So it happened a little bit more frequently this year. But what I saw was probably the most atrocious tackling that has ever existed. I thought the Browns were bad, and this makes the Browns look like a high school team in comparison, where this looks like youth football. They blitzed. This is 35 seconds into, I think it was the first quarter. I don't remember because I didn't write it all down. They blitzed the offense in an attempt to get pressure, which is a smart move.
Sure.
And Forte burned him for like a 35-yard touchdown. Now, Forte is a beast.
Forte is good.
But when you blitz, you always take chances. But your objective is not to allow a 35-yard touchdown. Please don't. And Forte was just a huge problem. And this developed later, too, in Week 14 against David Johnson in Arizona. They started really well at containing, but it's like this defense tires out way too quickly. They come out strong in the first half. They're doing their jobs well, and it's like they wear out. Because they started on the opening drive. It was a 3-and-out. 2 attempts by Johnson, who's a great runner.
He is one of the best.
He was shut down. No gain. And then by the end of it, halfway through the third quarter, he just became a problem. They couldn't stop him. He was getting 3-4 yards on first down carries right up the middle. And I just don't understand. There was one instance, again, against the Jets, and I saw this actually happen a lot. Their corners were slipping. And it didn't rain in Miami during this game, or in New York. But they were slipping and falling over nothing. And against the Jets, one of those slip and falls resulted in another touchdown.
Yeah.
So footwork seems to be a huge problem. These quick cut, like you were talking about, where they make the sharp angle rather than a sloping curve, where burns these guys.
And they don't have the best secondary, I would say. They've got Byron Maxwell, who they acquired from the Eagles. And there's always a reason when a team's willing to part with a guy. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's just the guy's not that good. And I think in Maxwell's case, he might just not be that good. He looked good in Seattle when he was part of the Legion of Boom, but that could have been other guys making him look better than he actually was. I look at him as a liability in the secondary. A guy I really like, though, is Rashad Jones, the strong safety.
Jones does an excellent coverage job. He's a very good zone player, and he's quick. His problem is when with juke. When the receiver, especially very sharp, quick ones, where they bite on what they think is an actual direction change. Once the receiver gets inside of him, he finds it very hard to get his up and around. I don't know why. If he's inside the receiver, he can get up and block the passes. He was good at that. But when the receiver gets inside of him, he struggled a little bit. And maybe that just takes practice and timing. But out of his players, him and then my free agency pick, which is Kiko Alonso, were probably by far the best players. But the secondary needs help. For sure. But the other thing, and this is a quick thing back to the offense, was the offense only converted 37% of their third downs. They were 69 out of 188. And
that's low.
That just doesn't give your defense a lot of time to rest. And I think that might have contributed to it a little bit. If you're exhausted by the the second quarter because you're always on the field, you're playing no matter how good your defense is going to just fall off of a cliff.
Especially the linemen and those linebackers. The bigger guys, it takes a lot more for them to ramp up that energy to pass rush on every single play or defend the run on every single play, and it takes a toll.
If you're sitting on the bench for 5 minutes while they force a 3-and-out against your offense, now you've got to come back out and do a sustained drive again, and it's just...
It gets harder every time, which makes sense, I think, for what you're saying about how they would wear out over the course of a game.
And before I looked up that percentage, I noticed that they were just getting worse as the game brought on. And, you could argue, well, 60 minutes is a long time to play. But this is another reason. If your offense can't sustain drives, you don't get any rest. So you're already tired. You go to halftime, you get a break, but now you got to come out and do it all over again. You're already exhausted.
Right.
But Kiko Alonso really stood out. He led the team in tackles with 115, 4 pass deflections. He had 2 interceptions. One he returned for a touchdown.
That's exciting for a linebacker.
Oh, it always is. And a forced fumble. And not to mention, he's the fan favorite. He's only 20.
Would you say he's the Finn favorite?
Don't make me hurt you. I almost said it.
All right, go
on. He's only 26. This is his 4th season in the league. This is his first with Miami, which I think is a great sign.
Yeah.
And I think he's the type of player that I think can help rally this defense. What I noticed is week 3 versus Cleveland, what I really focused on, and this is really a neat technique that he does. Now, if you watch him, he shifts with the motion man. And what I mean by that is, usually a slot receiver or sometimes a running back will move from next to the quarterback and shotgun into a slot position or into a line. What he does is he plays in the middle, but he shifts slightly to one side or the other depending on what side the motion man's going on. So it's like he's anticipating the passes going to him,
right?
Which is unique. I don't notice a lot of other people doing that.
And that's important too, we didn't mention this, but the Dolphins run a 4-3 defense, so he's the only inside linebacker, giving him even more importance in the passing game to defend stuff like that.
And it was really interesting to watch because, like I said, I hadn't noticed it before. And then this is I don't know if it's something he does, but when he gets into a stance, and what they teach you in high school is to pedal your legs. So you keep your feet moving. So when the ball snaps, you're already kind of in motion. But what he does is his legs are more than shoulder width apart. I would say they're almost elbow width apart. But almost with the cadence of the quarterback, and it's really hard to notice it, but he hops twice towards the quarterback. So it's like he's creeping up on him, but not in the way you see a lot of them do where they kind of walk slowly up the line.
Yeah.
He kind of jumps, and as that second jump hits, the ball is snapped. And he just takes off. And he was really fun to watch. If I had to say two negative things about him, his man-to-man skills aren't the best. He's a very good pass rusher, but he's a linebacker.
Right.
But he's a very good pass rusher. I think he needs to work on his man-to-man, but what he really needs to watch is his tackling. And I know this seems countering to what I've said where they need to get better with tackling, but he has a tendency to throw them to the ground and has drawn a few of those unnecessary roughness penalties.
Oh, okay.
It's a great thing to be physical, but you need to know where to watch it because being physical is great. Penalizing on your defensive end is not.
Right.
He lines up on the line during blitz packages. This is the only time he lines up on the line with the defensive lineman. So he comes off, but they moved him around. He would be on the edge occasionally, but sometimes they'd stick him in between defensive end and defensive tackles.
Okay.
Which was weird. I'd never seen that before. And the last two things I'll say about him is he has great recovery. Like, he'll move to cover someone, the ball will snap, and he has this amazing ability to just whip around, change direction almost seamlessly without losing speed and pursue the football. Which leads me to the second point. He is fast.
Yeah.
He can pursue people. Whether it's receivers, running backs that sneak through, he has great pursuit. I think he's a must-keep for this team. In a team that desperately needs defensive people.
Right. Especially in run protection, as I think you have here, they were 30th in the league.
There were a couple times that the runner got behind him because he bit on usually a slot receiver.
Okay.
So I think it's something he's just got to watch. But when they got past him, he was able to pursue and secure tackles, but he's got to kind of pause a little bit more, especially being the only inside linebacker. You know, that becomes a very susceptible part to an inside run. But I like him. I think he's only going to get better. And if this is where he's starting with this team, I only hope to see his numbers go up.
Nice. Sounds good.
That might have been my most in-depth analysis I've ever had.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed listening to it.
But I like this team. And I didn't think I would. It's kind of like the Browns. It kind of surprised me. So that's what I have on the defense.
All right.
Do you have anything to add to the defense?
No.
Oh, cool.
I think the secondary needs help. Even though they statistically were better than the run defense.
They just need to improve all the way around.
Yeah. So I think it's ready. It's time for the TLDW segment for the Miami
Dolphins. I'm glad
Dolphins.
you say that because there's no way I'd ever say that properly.
It's okay. I practice in the shower every morning. Yeah, moving on.
Awkward.
Yeah, Dolphins were 10-6, second in the AFC East, got a playoff spot, then lost in the wild card, but they had some key components missing in Ryan Tannehill, the quarterback. Jay Ajayi emerged this season.
Kenny Stills was a phenomenal component, counterpart to Landry.
Yeah, Stills was good. If we had to give 3 suggestions for them this offseason, I would say, and not necessarily in order of priority, but I would say re-sign Kenny Stills.
Yes.
Sounds like they should re-sign Pico Alonso.
I would think they'd be foolish not to.
And then I would just say work on the chemistry between Tannehill and his receivers, which will come naturally.
And the fourth point I would add is focus on, in the draft, perhaps offensive line. An offensive line can always use help.
Yeah, and they're going to need a guard.
And they need to work on possibly procuring secondary, which Logan Ryan might not be too bad of a gain if they could pick him up in free agency from the Patriots.
That's a good thought.
Oh, that was my other free agent. You see what I did there?
Tying everything together,
Oh, yeah. I think that's always got to be weird for a player, though, when you play on another team in the same division you were just in.
Weird, but maybe kind of cool at the same time.
I think it makes you play harder.
Right. It's motivation. I know in Madden, that would always motivate me playing against a guy that used to be on my team. And I'm sure Madden is just like the NFL.
Right? Yeah, that's the way it works. That's how it works. Sign everyone to 7-year contracts.
I think that's all we got on the Miami Dolphins.
Keep an eye on them.
Yeah.
I was just trying to think of a bad pun, but nothing. I was just, don't let them fin you. Don't let them fool. Don't let them, they might just swim right by you.
Put this while we're ahead. Might be too late already.
Well, thank you guys all for joining us yet again. In the description below is a link to our email where you can send us anything you want, really.
Yeah.
If you have questions, comments, stuff you want to bring up, points you want us to make. We're trekking through the AFC East, so we still got the Buffalo Bills to come up and the New York Jets. So those are teams, if you would think we're something we should mention, let us know. Click the like and subscribe button below so you can stay up to date with our latest releases.
And follow us on Twitter at 2M_football.
Yeah, the underscore is crucial.
It is, otherwise you're going to find some random guy.
We've been there. But thank you all, we'll see you next time.
See ya.